welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eaterberg, and today I'll be discussing the 1930 film Street of Chance with my friend Amanda Kusek, who writes the 90-minute movie newsletter. Amanda, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for having me again.
So you've been on several times before. Remind listeners who you are and where they can find your work.
Yeah, I write the 90-minute movie newsletter where I love short movies. I love a short run time. I think it's really good challenge creatively to get a movie done in 90 minutes. So I write that on Substack, and it's just the 90minutemovie.substack.com.
Well, before we get into Street of Chance, I do want to update our place in history. It's only been just a few days since our last nominated film was released on January 28th of 1930. Now we're up to February 8th, so about 10 days or so. I didn't find too much newsworthy in the time. I did find one birth, which was Gene Hackman, who unfortunately passed away earlier this year. He was born January 30th, 1930. I knew he was in his 90s when he passed earlier, but
Wow.
just to see that he was actually born in 1930 kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, it puts it into context.
Exactly. And then just two kind of news items that I found. So February 2nd, William Howard Taft resigned as the Chief Justice of the United States. And I was a little bit surprised. I mean, obviously, I know that name as president, but I didn't realize he'd been Chief Justice after he served as president.
Yeah, I saw that fact as well. And I was like, I didn't know that.
Nowadays, presidents are president, and then they'll do speaking and things like that. But that's their last quote unquote job ever is as president. So it's kind of interesting.
Right. Yeah. And then I saw that one as well. And I saw also a couple things about certain different political things. But I guess a president of Mexico was elected, and then he was shot
Oh my
2
goodness.
hours after taking the oath.
Oh.
In February 5th, 1930, which I thought was interesting and quite horrifying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably the record for shortest presidency in history of any country, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only other thing I found, also on February 5th, on a little bit lighter note, the World Figure Skating Championships ended in New York City, with Sonja Henie of Norway winning the women's competition for the 4th straight year, and a man named Karl Schaefer from Austria winning the men's competition.
Oh, nice.
So those are the historical
That is
notes
much
I had.
cheerier information.
Yeah. They had no idea what was going on in Mexico, I'm sure. Any other historical notes you found?
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple, but all of them were like kind of convoluted. So I think that's it from my end. And also, I don't want to share any more depressing news.
Sounds good. Well, with that, let's move on to the film. As I mentioned earlier, Street of Chance was released on February 8th, 1930. It was directed by John Cromwell from a screenplay by Oliver H.P. Garrett, who wrote the story, Lenore J. Coffey, and Howard Estabrook, with uncredited writing from Ben Hecht and Charles MacArthur.
It stars William Powell as John D. Marsden, a.k.a. Natural Davis, Jean Arthur as Judith Marsden, and Kay Francis as Alma Marsden, and Regis Toomey as Babe Marsden. Great nickname, by the way. It has a running time of 76 minutes, so obviously I was a fan of that. Quite a short movie. And it was produced by David O. Selznick and distributed by Paramount Pictures.
And the only nomination the film received at the 3rd Academy Awards was a Best Writing nomination for Howard Estabrook. And there are some DVDs you can find on the internet, though they kind of look a little bit sketchy, a little bit secondhand. And there's also a couple of, I don't know if they're official versions out there. It's technically not in the public domain yet until the end of this year. So it's out there, but you got to look around a little bit for it.
Yeah, that's how I found it, was online, digging the internet.
Yep, it's there if you want to look hard enough. So we'll jump into the film, into the plot. We'll kind of go through things here. This film starts off, we're in New York City as our setting. We see New York City street. I think it ends up that we kind of understand it to be Times Square area, Broadway area, busy center of the city essentially is where this all takes place. We see a man selling some newspapers, and he's going to come up several times. And then we meet Mr. Marsden, J.D. Marsden, a.k.a. Natural Davis. And I really like the scene where we're first introduced to him, and I forget the other guy's name that he's with. They're standing on the curb in New York City, taking bets on whether the next cab that pulls up is going to have an even number license plate or odd number license plate. So they're literally gambling on anything they can do, place a bet on. So then Marsden goes over to buy a newspaper from the guy that we saw earlier, And we quickly realize that the newspaper seller is kind of the go-between, helping Marsden set up gambling games throughout the city and telling people where the games are going to be, getting the information from Marsden and all that good stuff. So that's kind of setting up who he is, what's going on with his life. Then, of course, we get the other side of his life, which is his actual job as a bond broker. We see his office, meet his secretary. His secretary gives him a telegram from his brother out in San Francisco, and who's messaging to say that he's just been married. And Mr. Marsden, JD Marsden, tells his secretary to send him $10,000 as a wedding present. I wish someone had given me $10,000 as a wedding present.
I looked up what it was worth today. I looked up what 10,000 was worth today. It's almost $200,000
Yeah,
is what it would be worth today. So it's a
I
pretty
believe it.
pretty good wedding gift.
Right. Yeah. I would have been able to buy a nice house with 200 grand if when I first got
Yep.
married. But of course, the $10,000 comes with one condition, that his brother Babe not use it to do any gambling with. Apparently, Babe's got a gambling problem, and even though JD also has a gambling problem, he's trying to break his brother of the habit. So he says the $10,000 is not to be used for any gambling. So they send off that wedding present. Then we meet a different woman, who we learn. I think I forget if she says her name, but it's her name in the cast list is Mrs. Mastic. And it's she comes in. She's all distraught, saying that her husband has lost all of basically their entire life savings to one of Marsden's games, and I'm not really sure why he ends up giving her the money back. I guess he feels bad for her, but
Yeah. I guess guilty, but I was unclear on that point too. I thought I had missed something. So
yeah,
I'm with you on that.
even when I went back and was kind of putting the plot summary together, I was like, why? I can't really remember a good reason why he gives the money back, but he does end up giving her money back, and I really like the scene where he's about to give her the bills, and you kind of see him have a thought, so he heads into his office and takes some ink and puts a fingerprint mark on a couple of the bills that he's giving her, so that in case, and again, he's giving her the money with the stipulation that her husband doesn't come around to any of his games anymore. So basically, you can have the money back, but don't catch me gambling this money again. I'm not. It's a one time deal essentially. So of course, in the next scene, we see the game that had been talked about earlier in the street, and who shows up but Mr. Mastic. And of course, he's got the stack of bills that his wife just got, but he claims not to know anything about it, even though Marsden can see the fingerprint marks on the bills. So he ends up kicking Mastic out, and there's a kind of a lengthy sequence with Mastic is in a bar, and there's some guys who start following him out of the bar, and eventually runs
Mhm.
into Marsden in the street again, and we see these two gangster-looking types come up behind him, and then the next thing we know, there's newspapers flying across the screen talking about a Mastic who's been murdered, and Marsden is the prime
Yeah,
suspect. And
major
yeah,
major headlines.
yeah, front page, top of the
Which I thought
newspaper.
was interesting because I was like, I know it was all for the plot, but when you think about it, realistically, or like, hopefully they were. I was thinking, well, if they want to kill someone, they would probably be doing it on the DL, but
Yeah, I guess.
sure. Massive headlines. It was like gambling murder.
Yeah, and it was interesting. I think the first headline said something about they were interviewing Marsden in connection with this murder, or like they called him Natural Davis in the newspaper.
Yes, yes.
And then the very next newspaper is, oh, the case has been dropped. It's nothing.
Just kidding.
Yeah. So, and actually, the one thing I didn't mention in the scene where he's giving the money back to the wife, there's also a quick bit there where he gets a court summons for, I guess, some divorce proceedings with his wife, and so now there's obviously all the gambling stuff, but there's this side plot that's going on with his wife basically wants out in unless he gives up the gambling. So there's
Mhm.
several scenes throughout where, and I think that's one of the ones that comes up here where he's saying, let's rip up these court papers. Let's, figure things out, and I'll give up gambling. But oh, I just have to tie a few loose ends up. I got to, make sure everything's sorted out before I get out of gambling. And of course, she's saying, no, you have to do it tonight. You have to get out right now, right away. No questions asked. So this, I think, is where we finally really get introduced to his brother, Babe, and the wife and his wife Judith, who've just arrived in New York City from San Francisco. And then there's obviously some time has passed because we've had this whole murder and all of that has gone on. So there's been some time that's passed in here. The brother and his wife are in New York City, and he's already gambled the $10,000 wedding present. I think it was up to 50,000,
Mhm.
and he's trying to get it up to 150,000. So he's trying to make some major money. So I'm just doing the quick Google. So two and a half, almost 3 million for 150,000, if I'm doing the math correctly.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He's trying to make some major money.
He wants to retire young.
Yeah, exactly. So the two of them, Babe and JD, have run into each other in the streets, and Babe is, trying to say Babe doesn't know at this point that JD is Natural Davis. He just knows of this gambler named Natural Davis who's famous in New York City, and he wants to get in on the game with Natural Davis. And sounds like he's got something cooking where he's going to be able to make this money that he's looking to get. So JD agrees to get him into that game and basically goes to his friends who are going to be part of the game and says, I can't be there tonight, but you make sure you take this guy for all he's worth so I can teach him a lesson. And then he also meets on the side, he also meets with Judith, the wife, and basically says, he's been gambling. That's where he's going out. I'm going to teach him a lesson. And then you have to promise me that you'll get him out of town on the first train in the morning as soon as he's lost everything. But he also says, I'll still make sure to take care of you guys. You're not going to be destitute. I'll handle things for you.
Mhm.
So then we finally get to the game, this card game, yeah, poker game, and it appears when they first get to this that Babe is doing much better than than everyone had anticipated. So eventually,
Much better.
JD shows up and reveals himself as Natural Davis, and now the friends who are part of the game, they're starting to get suspicious of both of them. Babe is starting to get suspicious of JD. Everybody's getting suspicious of everybody at this point, and Babe continues to do really well. And then at the very end of the game, I think if I remember correctly, he was basically going on credit towards the end in order to match some of the bets that his brother
Mhm.
was making. And
Yeah, he was like, "One of us is gonna leave here broke,"
yeah,
or whatever.
yeah, we're playing until one of us is broke, essentially. And then in the very last hand that they play, naturally, JD has, I forget if it was aces, and then he's got a fifth ace or a third. He's basically got an ace up his sleeve, and he's cheating in order to finally teach his brother a lesson.
Mhm.
But his buddies catch him, and now they're thinking, oh, he's been cheating this whole time. But he insists, no, this is the first time I've done it. I've always been on the straight and narrow. But obviously, they don't believe him and run him out. Now he's the one who's gonna have the mark on his head, like Mastic did earlier. So before that, one of the other scenes with JD and his wife, he kind of said to her, "Oh, I have to take care of this one thing with my brother. My brother's in town. I've got to help him with something." And of course, she thinks, "Oh, he's just going off to gamble. He's just making up an excuse." But obviously, this this time he's actually telling the truth to her.
Right.
So she has run off. He goes back to their apartment. She's already left. And now, yeah, I forget, I think he leaves a message with one of the people at their apartment building and basically goes off to kind of face the music. He knows that his buddies are going to be after him. And then the wife comes back, missing each other by not very much time. And she and the operator at their building are trying to call around to all the different hotels where they know that he plays cards and stuff, and they leave messages at all these hotels. And then we see him come down out of one of these hotels. He's kind of holding his side. Obviously, something's wrong. He's injured. So we kind of are quickly able to figure out what's happened. He gets a note from the man at the desk, the receptionist in this hotel, and we don't get to see what it is. And he kind of heads out into the street. The doorman there says, realizes that he's not doing too well. There's a police officer nearby. They end up calling an ambulance for him. So he's either been, I'm not sure if they ever said, but it's clear he's been either stabbed or shot. So they got to him, whatever happened up in that hotel room. So he makes it out to the street. They call an ambulance for him, and then with the very last scene, he's in the ambulance with the cop and the doorman, and they're taking him to the hospital. He pulls out the note, and the note says, "Mr. Marsden, please call your wife." So kind of seems like she was gonna forgive him and take him back after all, but as soon as he reads the note, he passes away, and that's the end of the film. So it ends on a little bit of a lot of bit of a downer.
Yeah. Big downer.
So what did I miss? I missed anything major? I know like I said, it's 75 minutes. It's a short runtime, so it's right in your wheelhouse.
Very short, yeah. Yeah, you get right through it pretty quickly, which I appreciate it because the audio was so rough, which I was reading that, obviously very common for that time because they had just started using audio. So you really have to pay attention, you really have to use your ears. I felt like it was harder for me to, since the last time I've been on your podcast, we did silent films. And so it's funny, I found it easier to focus on the silent films than the bad audio film, which I found interesting. So it's a little hard to follow at times because 'cause you're like, "Oh, they're very far away from the mic."
Yeah, and it was interesting too. The one major I noted it a couple times, and I think it was mainly in some of the scenes where they're actually having the card games and the craps games in the hotel rooms.
Mhm.
And it was like the beginning of the scene, it was kinda the camera was right close next to the table, and then it would kind of I don't know if it was a zoom out or if it just kind of they physically moved the camera, and I was a
Mm.
little bit surprised to see that because you always hear they had to put the camera in this box with mattresses and all that stuff to keep the sound of the camera, so I was
Right, right, right,
surprised to
right.
see that much camera movement in a film of this period.
Yeah, they did make an attempt, but I was still thinking that though. I was like, "Oh, it is so much more flat than the silent films we watched," because they had to film things so dead on or closer, like you were saying, like, keep the sound down. So I was like, "Oh, right." Like, now we're in this new generation of filmmaking where it's kind of disrupted what they had already figured out or worked on or achieved previously. It's very interesting. I never What was that movie? What's it called? The Margot Robbie
Oh,
movie,
Babylon.
about when they added sound to the video. Yeah, Babylon. I never watched it,
Oh,
unfortunately, but I
I
know that
love
that's what it's about, so.
yeah, I loved that, and I thought they captured a lot of this very well. There's a whole scene with her kinda,
Ah.
the dealing with that whole sound issue.
Yeah, so maybe I need to give it a go because I find it really interesting how they had to kind of recreate film
Yeah.
very early on in its, like, in its infancy, which is really interesting.
As you were talking, I was thinking to how thinking back through some of the scenes, obviously all the ones where they're playing cards, they're all kind of huddled around a table.
Mhm.
The one scene I'm thinking of where right before the whole thing with the newspapers and Mastic being murdered, he's talking to Marsden as they're coming out of a hotel, and everyone's just kind of clustered in the doorway of this hotel,
Yeah.
so that I'm sure there's a microphone right above that spot. So going back, you can
Huddle up.
pretty much tell exactly where all the microphones are in every scene.
Yeah, it was very interesting. If even though hard to hear them, very interesting to kinda see how they were coping with that and dealing with that to make the movie. It was really, really interesting. Especially because I've been watching the silent films with you and, like, watching things that I don't normally watch. It was a very cool, progression.
Yeah, I enjoyed this one. Obviously, we'll get to our kind of ratings and stuff towards the end,
Mhm.
but I actually really enjoyed this probably more than I anticipated going in, which was good.
Mm. I think, movies about gambling are always interesting, you know? I think they can capture your interest. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for those. It reminded me, obviously Ocean's 11 comes to mind. Rounders came to
Mhm.
mind. More recent
Yeah, I
examples,
thought Rounders too.
but that the sequences of the card games, it's something that's never going to go out of style. Even what was the James Bond Casino Royale? The James Bond movie has a
Right.
whole couple sequences
Yeah.
for that.
It's a good point.
Well, let's move on to talking a little bit about the folks involved with making the movie. So, John Cromwell, the director, had a successful stage career before making films. This is actually one of the first films that he made. The information I showed said that he started as an actor, film actor and director just in 1929. So, this was very early in his film career.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
And then I also saw I didn't see why, exactly, but he did appear on the Hollywood blacklist, so that kind of
Oh,
derailed things for him, unfortunately, later in his career.
as it did for so many.
I mean, I know why he's there, but yeah, I don't know the specifics.
It's interesting you say I didn't actually look him up, so I was looking up the, actors, and it's interesting you say that he came from the stage because a lot of the actors also came from Broadway. A lot of them started in New
Yeah.
York. I think William Powell, Jean Arthur, and Kate Francis all came from Broadway, and again, it's this thing about them introducing sound. I was reading it they could all project because they had been on
Yeah.
stage, and so a lot of them made their way from New York out west to try, to get into the talkies and try their hand at film because they were really the only ones who could project enough to be heard on the microphone. So that was interesting. Like it was a whole group of them going out there around the same time to make these movies and leaving the stage, which is interesting.
Yeah, and that's the thing too. I know Kay Francis. I think she had just started acting in like 1929 or 1930. So this was one of her first films.
Mhm.
And she would end up being a top. I saw that she was Warner Brothers' highest paid actress in the 30s for a while.
Mhm.
So she became really big. And then Powell and Jean Arthur were both nominated for acting awards a little bit later in their career. Jean Arthur had one in 1943, and then Powell had two in the 30s and one in the 40s as well. Neither of them ever won, but they were at least nominated.
And I saw that Kay Francis and Powell went on to make like 6 movies together in total.
Yeah.
Like they started a duo thing for a long time, which is cool. But this was the first one that they did together.
And I kind of wish that we'd had a little bit more of the two of them together in this. I mean, they
I do too. I was just gonna say that. I do too. I really think that would like they had really great chemistry, and I was disappointed we didn't get more of them together because it was a really interesting dynamic and they had really great chemistry, especially given what we're saying about this audio and the time and the filmmaking. Like they had
yeah.
amazing chemistry, I thought.
Yeah, and in general, I would have liked to have seen more of the supporting characters. Obviously, Marsden is the main character, so he's kind of the
Mhm.
focus. And I thought Powell played him really well. I thought he was what's the word I'm looking for? Charming enough at the beginning to make us like him, even
Mhm.
though we can clearly tell he's not the greatest guy once we get down to it.
Yeah. I want to talk about this character because that was another thing I found in my research. I don't know if you saw this as well, but it's based on the real life person Arnold Rothstein. Did you come across
I
this?
did see that name. I didn't dig too much into that though.
Okay, so Arnold this is the craziest thing. This is my favorite piece of fact I found while I was researching this. So it's based on Arnold Rothstein, who was like known for being the mastermind behind the 1919 Black Sox scandal.
Ah.
But he's also it's the same guy that Meyer Wolfsheim is based on in The Great Gatsby, same guy.
Huh, that's an interesting connection.
Yeah, so when I saw how it was just interesting to me now, like, going back and thinking about how Powell was playing him versus how we always see Meyer Wolfsheim in, like, all the Great Gatsby
Yeah.
adaptations. It's like a very different take, like, very different take about this guy's personality and who he is. So it's really interesting just to, like, have those 2 like, thinking about that dichotomy now. I'm glad I didn't know when I watched it, but now I'm like, "Oh, do I watch it again to, like,
Right.
wrap my head around that?" Because I just, like, Great Gatsby is my favorite book, so that's probably why I'm so jazzed about this. But it's just interesting, like, the characteristics of him in that book and then in all the film adaptations, very different from how he's written and how Powell portrays him in this movie, so it's very, very interesting.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to go back and reread Gatsby now with that in mind, because that's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, I was like so this guy was, like, very well known, so it's pretty cool. Like,
Yeah,
I just that was my favorite tidbit to find. I was like, he's a really well-known person that they're basing all of this on, so
that's
very
cool.
interesting.
Yeah, glad you mentioned that. Speaking of well-known people, the one other bit I wanted to touch on just, in terms of the writers of the film, so Oliver H.P. Garrett, who was in on Wikipedia, he's just listed as story, so I don't know if he did any of the actual dialogue writing or scene writing or anything like that.
Mhm.
But he served in World War I and received a Distinguished Service Cross, and then he also did interviews with both Al Capone and Adolf Hitler, of all people, so I guess he was a journalist as well, so quite a group of interviews that he was able to capture.
That's cool.
Yeah. And the other writers, Lenore J. Coffey, which she I've continued to be a little bit surprised by how many women are often credited on these films of this era as writers.
Mhm. I thought so too.
And the winner for not for this film, but for this year at the Oscars, the winner of the writing award was a woman, which again, I'm happily surprised, but surprised me nonetheless.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And then the other writer, Howard Estabrook, who I mentioned, he was the one listed as the nominee for the writing on this film, would end up winning for writing Best Adapted Screenplay for the film Cimarron, which is coming the following year at the Academy Awards. So not the best known, because that film also won Best Picture, and it has the dubious distinction of often being considered the one of the worst Best Picture winners ever. And I've seen it. It's not great, but I'll be excited to talk about it nonetheless when we get around to that.
What a horrible distinction to have.
Right. We'll return to Mr. Estabrook when we talk about that film, I'm sure. I'm thinking that I'm probably going to like this film, his work in this film better than his writing for that film when I get back to it.
Yeah.
Anything else on any of the folks involved, actors, director, writer, anybody?
No, I just had my one big nugget, honestly. And then, yeah, just reading about how they were all really stage actors is just interesting for me as well. It just gives you like a really good sense of place and time when you're watching these films to think about what was going on industry wise. So,
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Obviously, we have cross-pollination now between stage and screen. You know, the one who always comes to mind is Hugh Jackman. He's done a lot of stage productions, and obviously
hmm
he's an A-list movie star on top of that. But I feel like nowadays it's more they might start off in stage work and then transition into film, and then they end up
hmm
going back to that later on because that's kind of something they really enjoyed as a young actor.
yeah, a lot of people go back. It feels like very common, especially as like they get more secure in their fame and
Yeah.
have like a fallback of funds.
Yep. And of course, it's good for the stage productions too. You can, if you throw Hugh Jackman's
Totally.
name or who did I see? Was it Tom Holland did something? See Hamlet, I think. Or no, not Hamlet.
Oh,
Romeo and
maybe.
Juliet, maybe?
Yeah.
One of the Shakespeare plays he was in recently.
Yeah, I mean, Bryan Cranston's on stage a lot,
Yeah.
Cynthia Nixon's always on stage there. Yeah, keeps him nice and busy, but
So
I do think it drives a lot of people into the theater.
absolutely. You're gonna sell tickets to go see that big name. And obviously a lot of times they do it for limited runs, so it's limited availability of those tickets. So I know normally I make some notes about kind of the story. We talked a little bit about the story, the piece that you brought up.
Mhm.
I wasn't able to find too much else about it. Not much on the production. It's kind of a little bit of a forgotten film. I feel like there's wasn't a
Definitely.
whole lot of reviews. So I feel like it's just kind of skipped over by a lot of places.
Yeah, the only really interesting tidbit I found was that was an early it wasn't the first, but it was an early film that used a well-known song in the making of the movie, like, had a soundtrack, and I can't remember the name of the song now. Um, I thought I had it, but yeah, I was reading about how it was one of the earlier movies to use a recognizable song, which we know has now become, in some cases, a really important part of certain movies. And now we have terms like needle drop and all of that, but it was one of the earlier days of that, which was interesting as well when we are again talking about sound and what was going on. So it was that. And then they used rear projection, which apparently a lot of people did not like in the theater. Again, not the first to use it, but one of the earlier to use it, and people did not like it.
Yeah, I noticed that in the one that was very clear was the very last scene in the ambulance, because you can totally
An
tell that it's
ambulance, totally. I noticed that one as well too.
but I felt like a lot of the scenes on out on the streets when it's, them talking, I feel like it would have been way too hard for them to record sound on a busy New York street with stuff going on, so I'm guessing that's probably a lot of those kind of backgrounds of the New York City streets might have been rear projection as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's
Apparently people did not like it.
interesting technique, and I think we still see that nowadays, maybe more so in TV. Whenever people are
Totally.
driving, you see the back, rear projected stuff behind them. But obviously, they're a lot better at hiding it nowadays.
Yeah, it's a little bit easier. Yeah, it's harder to tell sometimes.
And I mentioned, I wasn't able to find much in terms of reviews. A lot of the reviews that I found had were referencing a 1942 film of the same title.
Yeah, I saw that too.
I don't wasn't really able to find much in terms of reviews. Obviously, there's kind of the standard sites that aggregate all the scores. I saw a 57% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, 6.4 out of 10 on IMDb, and a 3.2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So IMDb and Letterboxd are pretty
So it's
much
like
in line.
squarely in the middle.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not great, but it's not absolutely terrible. I think the Rotten Tomatoes is technically a rotten score according to their metrics, but I personally don't think it's quite that bad.
Yeah, I at first I thought it was moving, like, strangely slow for the runtime, but then I found it more interesting because at first I was like, "Oh, this one best writing? Ugh." But I think while the story is very simple, like, the plot's very simple, the dialogue is quite good. So once I was, like, focusing more on the dialogue and what the characters are saying to one another, I really came around to it.
Yeah, I you're absolutely right. The story is pretty simple, and it's simple, but it's also complex. I mean, there's a lot trying to go on, but the basic story is pretty
Mhm.
straightforward.
Yeah, and then, like, the just, like, the I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but, like, the context of it is just, like, gambling is bad, but I do think they had some, like, good moments where they were tying those things together, like, he is kind of I don't wanna say a cute moment, but it is kind of a cute it is cute in the way that it like, I would call it cute, but at the end when he's dying and I mean cute in terms of, like you're winking at something, but when he's dying, the EMT is like, "Oh, I bet you're gonna make it," and he says something like, "You bet wrong," or, "You've lost that bet," and then he dies, and that's, like, his last words. It
Yeah.
just was, like, a nice like, a cute little bow on the package kind of thing where they're tying it all together, which, I don't know, I think in some ways it could be like, "Oh, that's really corny," but I kinda liked it.
Yeah, there was a lot of I mean, it we think of kind of the gangster, the gambling, type films, and they're always there's a very there's a very specific way that the characters talk in those movies, and I felt like this one did that to an extent, but it didn't it was playing it straight, I guess, is kind of the what I'm trying to say, that, I think they weren't trying to make it sound over the top, and it wasn't over the top. I think it was they're just saying this is how it is, and I thought
Mhm.
that they did that very well.
Yeah, there definitely wasn't, like and I actually don't know what era all this, like I guess it was the '40s, like those Capone movies where they have, like, really they're heavily accented and they're kinda yeah, like you said, over the top.
Everyone's named Johnny and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Lucky and
right,
Sammy
yeah,
and yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah, so in terms of the Oscars, I talked about at the beginning, it's the one nomination, Howard Esbrook for Best Writing. The award there ultimately went to Francis Marion for The Big House, which I'm trying to remember now, took home a couple of awards that year. I can't remember exactly how many, but I know it took home a few of the categories. So I'm excited to get to that one. I haven't seen that film yet. But anything else you want to touch on before we get to some final ratings and wrap up today?
No, I think all my fun research findings have already dropped, and my thoughts on it, but, yeah, I think, like I said earlier, it's just very cool to go from the silent into this, like, I feel like I'm in film school or something, and it's been really fun to just understand the industry through this, so I appreciate you having me on because it's pushing me to watch things that I would always say I would watch but never get around to, so
Awesome. Well, I'll give my rating first on this one. Like I said at the beginning, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I appreciated the short running time of 75 minutes. That was a big plus for me.
Mhm.
And I think you're right. It was a little bit slow, but once we got past the halfway point, which is really only like 40 minutes into the movie at that short of a runtime,
Mhm, mhm.
it picks up pretty well, and the action keeps moving forward. So I think I was kind of in like a 6 to 6.5, but I think I'm gonna end up like 6.5 to 7 out of 10 for my rating on this. We'll
Ooh.
go with a 7. I had fun with it. I did enjoy it.
Nice. I think for me, I think I started at like a 5, but after like doing the research and now chatting with you, I think I could probably bump it up to a 6 because I am appreciating what it is and what it meant at the time and all of those things. Like I think I can appreciate it a little bit better now that I've done like the research and the work. I think it's so hard to watch these things out of context, like, now in 2025, like, it's a long time. So, yeah, I think I'm gonna bump it up to a 6.
Awesome. Well, as always, I will include a list of resources. We didn't mention too many reviews or anything, but if we have anything, I'll definitely link to it in the show notes, as well as where you can find Street of Chance online for yourself. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for coming on the show to talk about Street of Chance. Remind people once again where they can find your work.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me again. I really appreciate it. It's been really fun to go on this journey with you and watch these movies. So I really appreciate you having me on again. And folks can find me at the 90minutemovie.substack.com, where we celebrate short run times. So this one definitely falls into that category.
And don't forget to follow The Oscar Project at theoscarproject.substack.com. And be sure to come back for next Friday's episode of the podcast, where I will be discussing the film The Green Goddess. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at the movies.